policy, tensions in the Middle East, abortion, homosexuality, pornography, sexual ethics, media, technology, history, and America's godly heritage. We talk about anything that affects your faith, your family, or your freedom. So don't go anywhere, because Point of View starts right now.
Across America, live, this is Point of View. And now, Kerby Anderson.
Thank you for joining me. It is our weekend edition. We have our regular weekend edition team back once again. Penna Dexter, we're going to have to introduce this guy sitting next to you, or what?
Oh, I've been waiting for him to come back, Kelly. It's so good to have you back in studio. And
Kelly
I know it's your
Shackelford.
first time in the new studio.
It is. This is fabulous. So thank you to all the Point of View listeners for having such a nice studio that now can be broadcast to hundreds and hundreds of stations across the country.
Really very exciting about this. Penna, thank you for your broadcast yesterday. Of course, you had Chuck Donovan by phone and Robert Knight. Very good programs, and I really enjoyed listening to them as well.
Well, thank you. I get to host again on Monday, and I'm looking forward to it.
You know, one of the questions I got this summer occasionally was, where's Kelly? And I said, well, he's just taking a leave of absence, but we'll get to see him again. One of the other questions, Kelly, I get every once in a while is, what happened to that coach up there in Washington? Now, I think that most of our listeners have probably figured that out by now, because First Liberty has blanketed the airwaves. And, of course, you were on even Fox News this morning. One of your colleagues was on last night. But in case somebody has not heard, let's talk a little bit about Coach Kennedy and what has actually been taking place.
Well, we had an argument at the Ninth Circuit, Federal Court of Appeals. For those who don't know, the Ninth Circuit is in San Francisco, which tells you a little bit, right? It's Rush Limbaugh finally refers to it as the Ninth Circus because they're overruled more than any other court in the country, most liberal, Court of Appeals. So we knew going into the Ninth Circus, as Rush would say, that it was going to be pretty hostile. And we got an opinion. I got to admit, the opinion was a little surprising even to me. I need to step back a second. This case is about pretty simple facts. There were things that happened beforehand, but by the time we got to the end, it was simply about this. Can Coach Kennedy, who is a guy who made a promise to the Lord when he started coaching 8 years earlier, that after every game, he would go to the middle of the field where the battle happened, go to a knee, and simply thank God for the privilege of coaching these young men. He did that for 8 years. Things happened in the middle. Sometimes the kid said, hey, can we go, and all this. But by the end, it was all him by himself. And the school said, if you go to a knee, we're going to fire you. And he made a promise to the Lord. So after the game, the kids are turning to sing the fight song. So this has nothing to do with the students or anybody else. He went to the middle of the field, went to a knee, silently gave a 15 to 20-minute prayer, and he was fired. The opinion that was just handed down by the Ninth Circuit said that, and I'm not exaggerating, this is what they said, that a coach may not pray in public if anyone can see them. And I don't mean just kids. I mean somebody from the general public. So, as I said on Fox this morning, prayer is now the new pornography. And think of what this means if this is true. If you're a teacher, you can't pray over your meal. Somebody might see you. You can't wear a cross. If you're Jewish, you can't wear a yarmulke. You can't cross your heart. Let's go on and on and on. It would mean that every person in this country who works for the government, which is millions and millions of people, whether it's a school or a county or a city or whatever, can never do anything that, expresses their religion or it's a violation. That's just a complete perversion of the law. That's really hostility to religion. But that's what the decision says. And so Coach Kennedy is certainly not backing down. We're not backing down. We're going the next step. But I think it really is a message to the country that we've come to the point to where this is a decision handed down by a court that they want to make the law of the land.
So this decision, this opinion, it is a little bit strong, over the top. Was this the argument?
Yes.
Was it argued that people should not be able to ever pray in public? No government official to show anyone any inkling that they happen to depend on God?
Their argument was when you are on duty, you can't do anything. And this is the order that the letter they sent him said, if at any time you do anything that anyone can tell is religious, when you're on duty, you're fired. And that was the argument. The issue is they think that when you're on duty, you're a government official, and therefore you can't do anything religious, which is the opposite of an old case called Tinker that said in the 1960s, neither students nor teachers lose their First Amendment rights at the schoolhouse gate. They are now saying all the teachers do, and administrators and coaches and everybody else. But it goes further because, I mean, the arguments usually made here are, well, and they made some of these arguments in the opinion, but they didn't limit it to this, that, well, these are impressionable children. And if they see somebody pray,
like showing them a nude picture.
Yeah, if they see somebody pray, they'll feel pressure to pray. It never works the other way. What if they never see anybody pray? Do you think that might influence them? So it's a bizarre argument. But this opinion didn't limit to that. Yeah. It said if he were to pray, even if the students weren't there,
right?
If somebody in the stands or somebody in the general public saw him praying, then that would be a violation.
He's an agent of the government. So, can't do that.
So it really would be a sea change and would restrict. I mean, most people. Would affect. Millions and millions of people. Most people who work for the federal government, the state government, the county, the school districts. Most of those people are people of faith, whatever their faith is. And to say that they're now all stripped of their ability to even bow their head over their meal because somebody might see them, is incredible. So anyway, needless to say, what I've enjoyed is. Nobody talked to us, and immediately they were Major League Football players on TV saying, this is wrong. And I think the country knows this is wrong. And what's happening to Coach Kennedy, the irony of all ironies, a guy who served 20 years in the military in the Marines, whose son is now in the Marines, and he'll tell you, why did you stand up? He'll say, I made a promise to God, but it's not really, as a Christian, I expect to be, persecuted, whatever. He said, what makes me stand up is, as a Marine, I fought for these freedoms. And the idea that the government can now tell me when and where I can pray, this is why I spent all the years in the military. This is why my son is in the Marines. And so that is really the motivation for Joe Kennedy. That and the modeling for his kids. He says, if I'm not willing to stand up, what kind of message does that send to these young men that I'm trying to encourage to be great men and to stand by whatever beliefs they have, religious or none at all?
Sounds like the law of the Medes and the Persians coming out of Persia and Babylon. Daniel, you may not pray. In this particular case, Coach Kennedy, you may not pray. Let's take a break, and when we come back, we have a lot more to cover. There are a number of other issues related to this, but if you'd like to join our conversation, what are your thoughts about the Ninth Circuit Court? At least 3 judges, in their inscrutable wisdom, are convinced that we cannot even allow a coach to pray after a football game. Your thoughts, 1-800-351-1212. We'll be back right after this.
This is Viewpoints with Kerby Anderson.
Over the last few years, I've been speaking and writing about the challenge that technology poses to parents and really to all of us. And if you watch the news and visit various websites, you will see the growing concern on the part of parents and policymakers. Perhaps you read about the Denver anesthesiologist Tim Farnan, who has been on the crusade against smartphones. He is convinced that they have turned his young sons into zombies. He says it made them moody and withdrawn. As a responsible parent, he has limited their time on them and discovered that his sons exhibited scary withdrawal symptoms equivalent to the withdrawals of a crack addict. You may have also read that he wants a ballot initiative to make Colorado the first state to ban smartphones to preteen kids. A study by Common Sense Media surveyed more than 1,700 parents of children ages 8 to 18 who shared their perceptions of their children's engagement with media and technology. The parents did see some slight positives in terms of relationship with friends, and they also thought that they saw a slight benefit in education. But on the other hand, they detected many problems. By a margin of 3-1, they believe that technology hurt their kids more than it helped their kids with face-to-face communication, ability to focus, and behavior. By more than 5-1, they all agree that these devices have a harmful impact on physical activity, and they also, by a lower margin, believe that heavy screen time hurt emotional health more than it helped. These and other stories should be a reminder to us that we need to set an example for our children and grandchildren. If we're addicted to technology, then we shouldn't be surprised they become addicted to the same technology. Also, we should work to protect them from the negative aspects of smartphones and social media. Young people spend too much time in front of a screen. I'm Kerby Anderson, and that's my point of view.
From Sony Pictures, All Saints, the inspiring story of Pastor Michael Spurlock with John Corbett. Now playing, rated PG, allsaintsmovie.com.
You're listening to Point of View, your listener-supported source for truth.
In addition, talking about this decision that has come down from actually 3 justices in the Ninth Circuit Court, and maybe now it will go to the entire Ninth Circuit Court. But again, we have our weekend edition, Penna Dexter, Kelly Shackelford, and a full bank of phone calls. So we'll get to some of those calls in just a minute. Let me talk about a couple of resources. First of all, of course, you can link to where Kelly Shackelford's picture is. That will take you to First Liberty. And of course, you'll have the information there. I've posted an article by Todd Starnes, which I thought was very good. And Kelly just told me of another one that's in Breitbart's. We'll try to post that before the hour is up. Those are some great resources for you to, first of all, read, then click the share button, put it on your Facebook page, start a conversation, expose other people to it, show them the link to First Liberty. There's some ways that we can get involved. But I've heard some people, Kelly, even say that this could go much further than you might imagine. Imagine a kid is hurt out there. The natural reaction from a Catholic would be to cross themselves. The natural reaction from an evangelical would be to kneel and pray. And this could be even seen as inappropriate at a time when I think all Americans would say, if somebody's hurt or something is really tragic, of course the first inclination is for us to pray.
Yeah. Again, under the words of this opinion, that's against the law. If any of those people work for the school district or the government, and then they can't do that. They can't ever, again, what they ordered Coach Kennedy to do, because, earlier what had happened is some of the kids had said, hey, we noticed that you're out there praying. Can we go with you? Mm-hmm. And he said, hey, it's a free country, and you do whatever you want.
Yeah.
And he had some kids say, look, I'm not a person of faith. And he says, man, he said, I totally support you. He said, in fact, I'm more likely to make you a captain because you're standing for what you believe. So he was great with the kids. There was no problem there.
And there was never any kind of pressure or organization of
coercion,
the prayer.
No, never. In fact, it was conceded in the opinion that there was never any coercion. Never did he ever do any of that. But just to be safe towards the end, he said, I'm just going to go by myself because I don't want the kids to get in trouble. And so he waited until he knew they were singing the fight song, turning around facing the crowd. That's when he went by himself and went to a knee. And, I mean, I can't think of anything. I mean, really, if he hadn't told them, how would they know it was prayer, right? I mean, he went to a knee. One of the briefs I thought was really interesting, filed in the case, was by an African-American school. I don't know if you heard about this, but the coaches, the kids there, it was all African-American, and they went to a knee during the national anthem. And the coaches, to support their players, did that. Now, a lot of people disagree with that, right? We got the pro thing going on and all that.
I understand that, yeah.
But that was their First Amendment right, okay, if they want to do that. They filed a brief. So this is to the liberal Ninth Circuit, and this is a more liberal, expression. They filed the brief saying, if we can go to a knee during the national anthem under the First Amendment, how can you punish this coach for going to a knee to pray after the game? And I thought it was a great point, but evidently lost on the Ninth Circuit.
Let me take some phone calls along the way, and I want to talk about what next steps are. But let's head to North Carolina, WLGP. Jay, thank you for joining us today here on Point of View.
Yes, thanks, Kerby, for taking my call. So I'd like to first extend a personal greeting to Kelly, because back in the early 2000s, my wife Debbie and I were in Greg and Carolyn's mini church with Kelly and his wife, along with Gene Lane and Jose and Lois and a few others. So it's great to reconnect with Kelly today. and I'll tell you, these days I'm retired, and I'm living along the Crystal Coast of North Carolina, next to the east edge of Camp Lejeune. And my church home is River of Life Church in Jacksonville, and most of our church body consists of Marines and their families. And I got to tell you, I'm honored to worship with these Marines who serve our country and serve God. So I'd really like to express my gratitude to Kelly and Michael Berry and others at First Liberty Institute for the great work they do to preserve religious liberty for members of the military.
Thank you.
Ronald Reagan, you bet. Ronald Reagan once said, some people spend their whole lives wondering if they can make a difference. Marines don't have that problem. and I tell you, I can confirm that the Marines I worship God with, they do make a difference in our community and to the far reaches of the globe through their deployments, as they serve our country with distinction and wholeheartedly serve God as a light to the world. So I tell you, it's great to know Kelly has their back in his efforts to preserve their religious liberties, to live out their Christian faith as they serve our country in the Marine Corps. So, man, I appreciate it, Kelly. And given that Coach Kennedy's son, I think you said his son is a Marine, I tell you, I love these guys. They're the best, and I hope things work out well for Coach Kennedy in the end. I know the Ninth Circuit is a tough place to argue this, I'm sure.
Amen. Well, no, thanks, Jay. I really appreciate it. We have a lot of cases, unfortunately, still going right now on behalf of those, in the different services that are being attacked because of their faith. You'd think you change presidents, maybe this changes. No, it doesn't happen that quickly. And so we've got a number of people that their careers are being threatened because of their faith. And we are defending those. But this is one of those rare cases where Coach Kennedy is a Marine, but this isn't about in the military. This is that certainly is part of where his heart comes from. But boy, this is about every coach out there, every teacher out there, and I would just encourage people, to be in prayer. Like you mentioned, your church. I've got to think that those Marines in that church and those families, boy, what a great thing for them to be praying for. Maybe God can use this for something great, and really we can establish a beachhead that makes clear that we do want people like this in leadership over our kids. We do want coaches and teachers and people. You don't have to be ashamed of your faith. We don't ever want anybody using their power to try to force their faith on anybody. But, of course, the facts are clear here. That never happened. But, wow, the idea of sort of religious cleansing like this would be a disaster. So I'd encourage people to pray. As Kerby said, go to pointofview.net and click on our stuff and take that and put it on your Facebook and your Twitter and your different things. And, get the word out there, because people need to know this is happening. If we unite the country in prayer and they speak with one voice, I think we can, have a victory here.
I think, Kelly, didn't Donald Trump mention this case during the campaign?
He tweeted a number of times about Coach Kennedy, said it was wrong and that it had to stop and that would stop if he were president. So one of the things I'm going to be really curious about is, by the time we go to the Supreme Court, is if the Trump Justice Department weighs in, because there are a lot of federal employees that are affected by this. They're going to have their religious freedom stricken, and this is one of the big things that the president ran on. So we'll see.
Yeah, I wonder about prayer before the Supreme Court, or speaking of God in the halls of Congress. Yep. All of that could be up for grabs.
Certainly could be. Let's take a break. When we come back, we have a lot of questions. Some would this restriction involve other religions? Some talking about the fact that Marco Rubio might be sued for posting Bible verses on his Twitter account. We're going to get into that. Some have got some stories of where they've been prevented from praying in certain venues, so we'll get into some of those. And then a little bit later, we'll get into the question about monuments and statues. And a lot of people said, well, if we just put the monuments or the statues in a place where people won't see them, then it won't be controversial. And a couple of days ago, I said, do you remember that cross in the middle of the Mojave Desert? That was enough to go all the way to the Supreme Court. So I don't think that's going to be a very good solution. But just before we take a break, I did want to just a shout out to our listeners there in Corpus Christi. We've got Hurricane Harvey about ready to hit landfall there. Last time we had a hurricane in Texas was Hurricane Ike in 2008. Last time we had a major hurricane in Texas, it was 2005. And so this is something to certainly be in prayer about for some of our listeners out there in that area of Corpus Christi and Galveston and some other places where it might hit. So we're thinking about you as well. We have an entirely full bank of phone calls. So let me again just mention what Kelly said just a minute ago. Go to our website, pointofview.net. You can click on his picture. That will take you immediately to his website. Or, of course, you can just go to firstliberty.org. Either way, when you get there, you'll have some of the information. But we posted you a few articles that you might want to find helpful. One by Todd Starnes, which I thought was very good. And we'll post this other one by Breitbart. This is a conversation that needs to take place, and because it came down, we wanted to wait till Kelly was in studio to talk about what we already knew was there. Some of you perhaps have seen some of the interviews. If not, of course, you were on this morning on Fox News last night. Hiram was on, so you can go back and watch some of those. We can put those links up if you'd like, but there is a button there that says support Team Kennedy. Hashtag Team Kennedy. So again, we give you that link so that you can do something constructive and certainly be in prayer for the next steps, which we'll talk about when we come back. If you'd like to join us, full bank of phone calls, so you might have to wait till somebody drops off. 1-800-351-1212. Great to have Kelly Shackelford back in studio, Penna Dexter here, and we'll be back right after this.
From Affirm Films and Provident Films, who brought you War Room, comes All Saints. New pastor Michael Spurlock, his struggling congregation, and a group of refugees come together, trusting God as they plant seeds for a future that might just save them all.
Start a farm, we work together, we save the church.
All Saints, starring John Corbett. In theaters August 25th, rated PG. Parental guidance suggested. More information is available at allsaintsmovie.com.
Point of View Radio wants to fuel change in our culture, but we need your help to do it. And I use the word need very intentionally. I worked with a well-known radio ministry for 29 years, a program that helped a lot of people. They got saved, they got elected to Congress. It produced a lot of good. But people started thinking that someone else would give, and that program isn't here anymore. Your gift today can make sure that doesn't happen to Point of View. Visit pointofview.net and click the banner Change Happens With You, or call 1-800-347-5151. Pointofview.net at 800-347-5151. Point of View will continue after this.
You are listening to Point of View. The opinions expressed on Point of View do not necessarily reflect the views of the management or staff of this station. And now, here again is Kerby Anderson.
Weekend edition around the round table. Penna Dexter and Kelly Shackelford talking about Coach Kennedy, the decision that's come down from 3 judges on the Ninth Circuit Court. And I know some of you want to ask what's next steps, so we'll talk about that. But let's take another phone call, because the extent of this ruling, I think, will be illustrated by this next phone call from Michael in Missouri. Michael, thank you for joining us. I know you're listening on KNEO. What would you like to add to our conversation today?
I was just wondering if this would extend to other religions. Say if I were a member of the Shinto religion or Islamic, would I not be allowed to pray, or is it just Christianity that's being restricted?
We'll have to wait. We'll have to wait and see what they do. But the opinion is very clear that if you are on duty and you do anything that anyone can tell is religious, period, then you're in violation. So again, one of the examples that immediately comes to mind to me is, a Jewish, teacher who wears a yarmulke, or
a Muslim with a hijab.
Yeah,
right?
I mean, they would be fired. And so,
but that would not happen.
That's what the opinion says, and that's what it would mean, because what they've done is they've created this bright line that once you work for the government, you don't have your First Amendment rights are gone, and you can't be. There's kind of 2 approaches you can have to diversity. One is to shut everybody down so nobody knows anybody is different. The other is to let everybody be who they are and teach what a unique thing at school, right? Teach that we're all different, and that's kind of what America's about. That some people have different religions, some people don't believe in all. That's freedom. That's diversity. And what it should be is we don't want teachers, government officials, et cetera, ever trying to push their religion or use government power to push religion. But again, in this case, it was conceded by everyone. None of that happened. And so this is about whether, even with there's no coercion, there's none of that, can a person go by themselves when the team's singing the fight song on the other side of the field? Can they go to a knee and silently say a 15-second, 30-second prayer alone? And no, you're fired. That's the ruling of the court.
It's just appalling. I think the thing that's sad about it to me is in the field of education where you do have impressionable young people, and I think that's probably part of the court's thinking is impressionable young people. But what we are doing instead, though, is with what goes on through our curricula, we're teaching that evil is good. What we're doing through our bathroom policies, our locker room policies that were being forced on us during the Obama administration, all of that. So it's really turning good and evil around, and they're taking each other's place in sense of what gets promoted. And to use the First Amendment, actually violate the First Amendment to do that, I mean, it's really, really has to be stopped. And that's why I'm so glad that Coach Kennedy was willing to stand, that he's a Marine and a fighter at heart, and the First Liberty's on the case.
Well, let's take another phone call, and then we're going to get into where this might lead as well. We'll go to Michael in Texas, KBJS. Thank you for joining us today here on Point of View.
Hello. Thank you for taking my call again. You mentioned before the break about Mark Rubio, and I don't know if that was something you guys already planned to talk about or if it was inspired by knowing my call was coming up.
I wanted you to lead us on in that topic, so go ahead.
Okay. Oh, cool. As I heard on the local radio station during the news briefs this morning, Mark Rubio is about to be or is being sued simply for posting Bible verses on his personal Twitter account, and not regarding the public or government account. It's just on his personal, like any of us would do. And the argument is simply because, just as this coach is being taken to task, is that simply because he is a government official, that the Freedom from Religion organization or foundation is saying that, no, you're a government official. And my thoughts on this is simply that all of a sudden the argument is basically summed up as soon as you become a member of the government or any other exclusively non-private organization, you are no longer a person. You're just part of this larger corporal entity, and you lose all personhood, and you must bend to the will of the state and whatever else you want to describe that as.
Yeah, no, that's a great description. You're part of the Borg now, right? You're now sort of part of the government machine, so you no longer have any individual rights. Which, you think of the Marco Rubio situation, and we'd love to represent Senator Rubio in this case. You think of I immediately thought of the Jefferson Memorial. Gosh, that's got to be way over the line, right? Yes. I mean, it mentions God in the Jefferson Memorial. That Jefferson didn't know anything about the Constitution or, the founding. And you just start thinking about all the stuff in D.C. that mentions God, and you just realize how wrong these are, but what is being attempted here is an attempt to change our country, and that's why it's so important that people stand up and say, no, this is not going to happen. I have a responsibility to my kids and my grandkids that I not let you try to take this country where you're trying to take it. And I really feel like people are starting to stand up against that. And I all races, all backgrounds. When we have rallies and different things, this is very multicultural as far as the different faiths and different races. And so But I think this is something that people realize that is really important to the future of our country, and that we really do have to stand, or we're not going to have any more coaches like Coach Kennedy. And, I mean, what hope is there for the future of our country and our kids if those kind of people can't be leaders? Guys who are Marines, who love the kids with all their hearts, who do it because of their faith, and now they're excluded. I mean, that's really a dark America if we go there.
Well, and again, if you even look like you're praying, that could be enough. I mean, sometimes coaches get on the knee. Roger Staubach's told the story many times before when he was a quarterback, and he would come to the sidelines and he would ask Coach, what's the next play? And the coach would kind of look up with his eyes closed, and then he'd give the answer.
He could be accused of praying.
And so after about the third or fourth time that happened, Roger Staubach said, well, I always knew God called the plays here. It was the old joke. But, now, I mean, you just think of all the things. Coaches sometimes are taking a knee anyway. Coaches sometimes, maybe have a silent moment just for everybody to contemplate before they go out. Any of that could be perceived as religious if we're going to have these religious witch hunters out here, because look what they did to Coach Kennedy. They could do it to anybody in the country, couldn't they?
Well, sure. And it's important to point out, guess how many people complained in the Coach Kennedy case? He did this 8 years.
Yes.
No one, no student, no family, no parents, anyway. He never did anything to force or coerce the kids. They all felt free. No issues. The reason this happened is one of the other teams, the administrators, talked to one of the administrators at his school and said, this is really neat what these guys are doing. And it was like, what? We got to do an investigation.
And that's where it started.
And the next thing you know, all of a sudden...
They're scared to death.
Mm-hmm.
Just before we take a break, a lot of people want to know what's next. Kelly, I know that you can't necessarily tell all of the strategy, but give us an idea of what could happen next.
Well, there's two choices, really, for Coach Kennedy. There's appealing what's called en banc, which at the Ninth Circuit, you get 3 judges at random, which we did. There's actually 29. You can ask for all 29 to sit and rehear the case. They rarely do that. But even when they don't do it, sometimes a number of them will write a dissent saying, we really disagree with this. And then you could go to the Supreme Court, or you could just skip that and go straight to the Supreme Court. Those are 2 options. And all of this, by the way, is we're just at the injunction stage. We're not even at the trial stage. This is just about the coach saying, hey, I just want my job back. I'm not looking for any money. I just want you to say this. You can't do this. You can't fire people for this reason. This is a violation of the Constitution, and I'd like you to put me back on. Well, so after all this is over, you still go back to trial if necessary and fight through that. So we've got a number of steps, but I think the first steps are the Ninth Circuit and the United States Supreme Court.
Well, again, if you go to First Liberty, it says support Coach Kennedy, and then it has a whole section on learn more, and then there's a place where you can donate, find out more about it, listen to some of the interviews. And, of course, we've posted a couple of very good articles, Penna, that I think people can follow, and I would encourage them. The assignment today is take one of those articles, either the Breitbart article or the one from First Liberty, or maybe Todd Starnes, post it on your Facebook page. Get that out.
If you want something to talk about over the weekend, this is it.
This is it. Let's take a break. We have a lot more to cover, and we will do so right after this.
When protests turn violent, as in Charlottesville, Virginia, we need thoughtful answers. Radio host Eric Erickson operates the conservative website Resurgent. There, in a post entitled, "What the Heck is Happening in America?" he writes that both the left and right are trying to build moral responses to the vacuum that is left as the West leaves God behind. They are competing to place their ideologies in charge. Mr. Erickson explains that with the collapse of shared Christian values in the West, the world is descending into natural law, where survival of the fittest reigns supreme. We should acknowledge that most of the violence at protests on campuses and elsewhere has been perpetrated by the left. But in Charlottesville, James Field's white supremacist ideas motivated him to speed his car into a crowd, causing a death and many injuries. Jeffrey Tucker at the Foundation for Economic Education says of the white supremacists, many of the young men and women involved in this movement were raised in good homes and under normal conditions would never hurt anyone. What this is about, he writes, is bad ideas. They crawl into the brain and cause people to imagine things that do not exist. It causes people to seethe with hatred for no apparent reason, to long for the extermination of people who have never done anything wrong. He says we must fight bad ideas with good ideas, clearly and lovingly communicated. Lutheran pastor Hans Fine suggested at the Federalist that President Trump could have clarified the situation by saying something like, just like violence in the name of leftism, white supremacy is nothing other than hatred and idiocy masquerading as ideology and conviction. Those who espouse these views have not taken the principles of one political party and corrupted them. They have simply embraced the doctrine of demons, the belief that man can build utopia by aiming violence and hatred at his neighbor. Every believer who has a platform must clearly and lovingly speak the truth before it's too late. For Point of View, I'm Penna Dexter.
Now, back to Point of View, your listener-supported source for truth.
Weekend edition, if you'd like to join us, we'll certainly be changing topics now. And, of course, if you still want to a little bit later weigh in on that, you're welcome to do so. 1-800-351-1212, Penna Dexter, Kelly Shackelford. Let's head to Texas. KYCC, Patricia, thank you for joining our conversation today.
Oh, hello.
Hello.
How are you?
Good. We'd love to hear from you.
Okay. Well, I was calling about the First Amendment right or the NFL players.
Yeah, what about the NFL players? We wanted to get into that issue, too, because I know you wanted to talk about that.
Yes. Well, essentially what I'm trying to say is that I don't believe that they're trying to disrespect the flag. What I think they're trying to do is make a statement to the movers and shakers in America to do something in concerns with race relations and also with how the police are policing the people. You know, this is not an Andy Griffith world anymore. We need to have officers like that. Essentially.
Yeah, let me come to Kelly because Kelly, the people that filed the amicus brief, that was a good example of that. The students and players, NFL players, whatever, are free to take a knee and then free to either have people support them or disagree with them. But if you take the knee and pray, that's a different issue, isn't it?
Yeah, that's the way they treated it. Again, let me make a distinction. Coaches on a public football team that take a knee like they did with those players, if their employer, the government, were to take action against them, that would be a violation of their First Amendment rights because they went to a knee expressing something. Let's move to pro football.
Yeah, a little different.
Yeah, the employer is not the government. So the only people that can violate the Constitution are the government. So the way it works with, if you're a pro football player is, do you have free speech to go out there and protest during the national anthem? Sure, you do. Can they fire you? Yeah, they can, because they're a private entity too, and they have free speech rights, and so that's kind of the way it works. That is not a constitutional issue because the government isn't the one that's taking the action. So that's more of a kind of a public relations and public employer. I think I saw that Jerry Jones said anybody who I think takes a knee is going to be fired or kicked off the team. So he can do that unless there's something in the contract, that says, that he can't, which I doubt there is.
And the NAACP can go, as they did, to the headquarters of NFL and say, we are going to call for a boycott of watching NFL football unless one of your teams hires Colin Kaepernick, which I thought was kind of interesting. But
yeah, I wonder how successful that boycott would be.
Well, we'll have to see where it is. But while we're getting into race relations, I had to. This always is fun to have at least one where Kelly's head explodes, and that is, we mentioned it just the other day, but it's a poor individual who was unfortunately named Robert Lee. He's Asian. He was supposed to do the broadcast for the University of Virginia playing William & Mary this weekend, and because his name is Robert Lee, they decided to move him off of the broadcast for the college broadcast tomorrow with the University of Virginia. But at first, all of us thought it had to be a joke.
Well, they did it for PR purposes. Yes. I think it's backfired.
And I think it was a tremendous PR black mark, wasn't it? Yeah,
it's just the dumbest thing I've ever heard. It's probably because he looks so much like the real Robert E. Lee. Right? I mean, somebody ought to put a picture of the two of them up.
Yeah, I guess that's the next one.
That would be really funny. But, that's just silly. ESPN has a problem.
Yes.
They've already...
Things have gotten very political over there.
They did, and I mean, there's a lot of reasons why ESPN had to lay off, like, most of their top announcers because they're just bleeding money. And it's not all this, but I think clearly the study showed that part of the reason is they were getting into politics.
Yes.
I think people who watch sports... number one, they'd rather not hear politics at all.
Yeah.
They're looking for somewhat of an escape and something fun and all that. But if politics is brought up, I think they tend to be more on the conservative side of, just keep your mouth shut and work hard, and that kind of thing. And so I think these kinds of snowflake things by ESPN, they've really lost their touch with their audience, I think. And this just sort of cements even more to the average football watcher. You're doing what? Are you guys nuts?
Bless his heart.
I think they're tone deaf with regard to their audience.
Yes.
I mean, when you think about sports, it's still a competitive environment where sort of the survival of the fittest. The best team wins, the best players get to play, and all of that.
Meritocracy, yeah.
Yeah, and so it's just these little complaints and victimhood.
Yeah.
Shows of, little fits, temper tantrums. They just don't play well. They just don't play well for sports fans. And even, I think, folks I know, most of my friends are very political, but they want to watch a football game without being interrupted by politics.
That's exactly right.
When you look at all these things, you think about how controversial the BCS was and even the playoffs were. We thought that's what we'd be talking about. We didn't think we'd be talking about whether this poor guy by the name of Robert Lee, who is Asian, would not be allowed to broadcast the game with the University of Virginia.
I still think it's the resemblance.
Yeah, maybe it is. Since we're having a little bit of fun, there is also a controversy about whether or not they can actually name a horse the same name of the horse of Robert E. Lee. Help this one. What's that all about?
Well, USC has they're complaining now about the horse that has a name that's similar to Robert E. Lee's horse, which is, I didn't think you could get more silly than the Robert Lee, not being able to announce the game because of his name. But I think the horse. I think that does top it as even more foolish than the Robert Lee.
Yeah, well, that's my alma mater, and I've been to many football games, and the horse, goes around the field, and even when I was a kid, and last week I had to complain about Stone Mountain. This week it's about my alma mater's mascot.
Well, and when we come back, let's get into that a little bit more. One of the articles we've posted here was by Victor Davis Hanson, who's done a very good job. And before that, Bernard Goldberg, Where Does It End? And, the argument that I've been hearing on Facebook is, would everybody stop using the slippery slope argument? In other words, the slippery slope argument would be, well, if we take down a monument to Jefferson Davis or Robert E. Lee or Stonewall Jackson, pretty soon they're going to want to take down other monuments. Well, the problem with that is here's one where they want to take down the monument of Christopher Columbus. Here's one where they actually took down one without permission. Here's one where they took it down in the dead of night. Here's one where they defaced Abraham Lincoln. Here's one where they actually defaced the Lincoln Memorial. It's sort of getting out of hand, isn't it?
Well, it's getting out of hand, and, I think some people are saying, well, some monuments are okay to take down, and other monuments aren't. But the problem is, where do we draw the line? And I'm just starting to think that, changing our history is really what it does. It changes our history, and so I think, maybe we ought to just take a pause on this whole idea of taking down and moving monuments.
Yeah, and a lot of people say, well, we could take the monument and put them in a museum, or we'll just put them in places where, maybe parks where people don't go. And, of course, the illustration I use is, that worked so well for a cross in the middle of the Mojave Desert, didn't it? So
that's right.
You can see if people have a desire to take things down, they're going to go into pretty obscure places to do so. So when we come back, I want to get especially Penna Dexter and Kelly Shackelford's comments on that. I want to get your comments as well. Penna Dexter's commentary today is on white supremacism, so we want to hear from her on that and a variety of other issues. And, of course, you have this CNN hate map and the Southern Poverty Law Center. So we have a lot more to cover in the second hour, and we will do so right after these important messages.
Is religious freedom still a cornerstone of the Republic, or has it effectively been crushed by the forces of tolerance? America needs Christians to be informed and as unified as possible, applying God's wisdom to civic life. Point of view can be a key part of a successful mission. I believe in America. I believe God wants His best for us. We can face whatever the world throws at us as long as we stand together. If you have not signed on, please do it now. Support Point of View Radio today at pointofview.net. Set up your monthly gift by clicking the Truth Team 360 picture and then carefully follow the directions. Pointofview.net. By phone, you can give at 1-800-347-5151. 800-347-5151. Or mail that first donation to Point of View, Box 30, Dallas, Texas 75221. Box 30, Dallas 75221. Or call us 800-347-5151. Point of View will continue after this.
I just thank God for y'all. I listen to you every day, truly. I wanted to thank y'all for everything you do each day to inform Christian families and our community about the things we can do, and just the way you're so informative. I listen to you daily and love you guys and appreciate you so much.
God bless you, Kerby, for keeping this show so on track and for the decades of wonderful help to this nation that Point of View has been. We're all big fans of your work, and we pray that God will just prosper it.
As a Christian, over the years that I've followed this program, I'm constantly challenged to be on guard and to evaluate what's going on. And if for no other reason, to protect the caliber and the truth of your programming, I need to participate and to back your program financially to ensure that the truth stays out there for people to hear, to view, and to be a part of.
This is Point of View Radio.
Hi, this is Kerby Anderson. You know, each day we take on the tough issues and provide a biblical perspective to them. The topics we cover are wide-ranging: apologetics, theology, prophecy, creation and evolution, intelligent design, marriage, family, child-rearing, the millennial generation, trends in society, politics, economics, business, religious liberty, the Constitution, public policy, foreign policy, military policy, tensions in the Middle East, abortion, homosexuality, pornography, sexual ethics, media, technology, history, and America's godly heritage. We talk about anything that affects your faith, your family, or your freedom. So don't go anywhere, because Point of View continues right now.
Across America, live. This is Point of View. And now, Kerby Anderson.
Second hour, it is our weekend edition. Penna Dexter, Kelly Shackelford in studio with us. First hour, we spent a fair amount of time talking about this decision that came down from the Ninth Circuit Court about Coach Kennedy, and we'll kind of look to the future of what will happen there. We do have some great information about that, and before the program is over today, we'll talk again about some of your action items. This hour, though, we wanted to move to our second article, this one by Victor Davis Hanson, Our War Against Memory. It appeared in National Review. And of course, over the last couple of days, we certainly have talked about the tearing down of monuments and statues. We also have a commentary by Penna Dexter on white supremacism, which we'll get to a little bit later, and also a piece by Michael Brown saying maybe the Southern Poverty Law Center is the most dangerous hate group out there. But what about this, Penna? We've had a number of individuals call in and say when we completely erase our memory of history, that maybe isn't helpful. But at the same time, we also understand how certain memories, certain statues, certain flags could be offensive. So how do we kind of think our way through this?
Well, I think this article is a good step because it's comprehensive, and you can't be completely comprehensive about history because history just keeps getting longer and longer and more complex. But Victor Davis Hanson is an historian, and he throws in so many possibilities and examples of people you could erase from history.
Yes.
And so, you know, I can't go through, I'm not even going to try to go through one single one of them. But when you get to the end, you start to, you know, it just convinces you of what a job it would really be to create a history that we would be able to be proud of, leave only those statues out there and get rid of the rest, and just, you know, make those changes. You could never do it. And then what happens if somebody is worse or better and more worthy of a statue in the future? So you just can't you can't know enough. You can't know everything about every statue. You can't know why it was erected. You can't know everything about it. A lot of statues were erected for good reasons, even though they perhaps honored somebody who was a Confederate leader. So I think it's a dangerous game to begin to get involved in. Now, I know that the left, extremists have made it dangerous on their own. So what do we do about that? Well, I think we have to police rallies.
I think so. And we've talked about that the other day just with some of the material from Jim Talent, former Senator Jim Talent, on what to do. I have a commentary coming out next week. But Kelly, this will be the first chance we have a chance to hear from you, because I know you've studied history, and of course you know the legal history as well of some of these issues. And how do we kind of think our way through what right now is an attempt to begin to tear down statues, memories, monuments, flags, and other things? Can you help us out?
Well, I think number one, you never do things in a frenzy. You know, I mean, when people are all worked up and angry and all that, that's never, I think it's just a basic point of life. You never make emotional decisions without thinking them through. So I think it's smart on any of these situations where I've seen some of the leaders say, we're going to study this, if they're really going to study it. You know, I mean, I wouldn't want a statue to someone who, you know, was a bad example. But there are those kinds of statues at places, and they probably have appropriate descriptions. You know, for instance, is there a statue of Lenin? You know, is there, I mean, you know, those things exist, and I don't think it's bad that they exist as long as there's some, you know, context to it. I I'm concerned about losing our history by moving things, and then we don't have any of that history. We lose it all. I mean, for instance, I think all these things are opportunities to teach. But I do understand, some of these things might have been put up for bad reasons, might have been put up with no explanation, and might communicate something that's not meaning to be communicated. The thing that we can't do is allow some group that, because anybody's offended at a statue, we tear them down. I mean, this is what we're fighting with all the veterans.
Obvious connection here.
Yeah, I mean, because that's where this will definitely connect to. We've got a case that we argued in December on behalf of the Bladensburg Veterans Memorial.
Mm-hmm.
That memorial has been up for over 90 years. It's a World War I memorial, a very traditional one, which is a large sort of cross, a narrow as far as the arms cross. Looks like a lot of them you see in World War I. It was put up not only by the American Legion, who we represent, but also in part by money from the mothers who lost their sons in World War I. And it sat there for over 90 years, and now there's a lawsuit to tear it down because the American humanists are offended that it's up. Again, you follow the logic of the Ninth Circuit opinion, you tear it down. You start tearing down memorials all over the country. But in the oral argument, one of the judges, there was a 3-judge panel, asked that, you're going to think I'm making this up, this is in the transcript, asked the following question: if we just cut the arms off the cross, won't that take care of any offense? And of course, our attorney was a little shocked and said, "You mean deface a National Veterans Memorial?" But this idea of tearing things down for people because people are offended is not is something we can't allow to happen. But I do have sympathy with, some things should be replaced with something better if they're up and they reflect somebody that we don't think is a good example, and there's no explanation and there's no context for what that is. But to me, if there's somebody who's bad, who did something bad, maybe even with good motives, what a great opportunity to teach your kids, to take them out there and to say, here's what this plaque says, here's what this says, let me explain to you. That's what history is all about, is learning and sort of being proud about what we've learned as a country and how we've grown and all that. So I think you have to look at each situation, but I think they shouldn't be made with these sort of mob tear things down. I don't think a lot of those people are even after the statues. I think they're after chaos and sort of moving us into some sort of revolt atmosphere where we move into socialism and communism and away from the free society that we're in.
I think the left would wipe out history so we don't know what our roots are.
Yeah.
And also, when you look at the Civil War, and, lots of people make their it part of their lifetime set of trips and vacations to see these memorials. I think you have done that, Kerby, with your son. And it's a way to learn from the past. I mean, the Civil War has many lessons to teach us. And if we don't learn them, we could repeat them. But instead, there are groups from the left that are just trying to bolster their victim status by wiping out anything that they see as an insult to them. And I think what's happened too in our schools is we haven't taught American history very well. And to teach it less and to make it more of a narrow focus is not the best idea. What we should do is teach it better. Let's teach history better. Let's use the monuments, not only to people that we revere, but people we don't revere, and teach more so that we can learn.
We'll be back right after this.
This is Viewpoints with Kerby Anderson.
You know, over the last few years, I've been speaking and writing about the challenge that technology poses to parents and really to all of us. And if you watch the news and visit various websites, you will see the growing concern on the part of parents and policymakers. Perhaps you read about the Denver anesthesiologist Tim Farnan, who has been on the crusade against smartphones. He is convinced that they have turned his young sons into zombies. He says it made them moody and withdrawn. As a responsible parent, he has limited their time on them and discovered that his sons exhibited scary withdrawal symptoms equivalent to the withdrawals of a crack addict. You may have also read that he wants a ballot initiative to make Colorado the first state to ban smartphones to preteen kids. A study by Common Sense Media surveyed more than 1,700 parents of children ages 8 to 18 who shared their perceptions of their children's engagement with media and technology. The parents did see some slight positives in terms of relationship with friends, and they also thought that they saw a slight benefit in education. But on the other hand, they detected many problems. By a margin of 3-1, they believe that technology hurt their kids more than it helped their kids with face-to-face communication, ability to focus, and behavior. By more than 5-1, they all agreed that these devices have a harmful impact on physical activity, and they also, by a lower margin, believe that heavy screen time hurt emotional health more than it helped. These and other stories should be a reminder to us that we need to set an example for our children and grandchildren. If we're addicted to technology, then we shouldn't be surprised they become addicted to the same technology. Also, we should work to protect them from the negative aspects of smartphones and social media. Young people spend too much time in front of a screen. I'm Kerby Anderson, and that's my point of view.
From Sony Pictures, All Saints, the inspiring story of Pastor Michael Spurlock with John Corbett, now playing rated PG, allsaintsmovie.com.
You're listening to Point of View, your listener-supported source for truth.
If you'd like to join our conversation, 1-800-351-1212. Privileged to have in studio with us today Penna Dexter and Kelly Shackelford. We have links to some of these articles that we've mentioned, and let's go to the phones once again in Texas. KBJS and Jerry, thank you for joining us.
Yeah, hi. Don't get to listen to the program often, but enjoying the comments today.
Well, thank you.
I'd been involved in a conversation about a week ago with a couple of people at work over breakfast about statues, you know, a lot of the things that are going on. And one of the people said, I wonder about this statue in Washington State that is, I think it was a Lenin, might have been Stalin. I think it was Lenin, though. And Fremont, I think they said that Fremont part of town, Seattle. I did just a tiny bit of research before I actually, after the call, because I was going to ask you. My question generally was, does the trend seem to be more related to American history, you know, and sure. I guess it all has to do with freedom of speech. But at any rate, that was my question.
Sure. Well, and just for people that aren't familiar, if you go to Seattle in what's called the Fremont neighborhood, there is a statue of Vladimir Lenin. And it's back to Kelly's argument. You know, of course, we've had some statues of Lenin being pulled down in Ukraine and other places like that. But there is a statue right there of Vladimir Lenin in the Fremont neighborhood of Seattle.
Should it stay up? Well, I think that could be a teaching moment. But again, do we agree with everything that was done under Vladimir Lenin? I think we all know the answer
Well,
to that.
I haven't heard anybody asking for that one to come down.
Well, there's a few in the community, because once you start down that road, any statue can come down. But I still do not understand, Christopher Columbus, all those statues have to come down. Defacing Abraham Lincoln, and then now even defacing the Lincoln Memorial. There's a sense in which, after a while, it gets back to the point you made, Kelly, a minute ago, when you don't have kind of a rational discussion and say, is there merit in this? Can this be a teaching moment? Of course, we've talked with A.W. Jackson. He was talking about, well, maybe we could put those statues in a museum. Well, maybe that's a possibility as a teaching moment or as a piece of art. But most of them, they just want to pull them down and deface them and meld them down. So I don't know. That's a question that you need to ask. But I would like to do it in an orderly way rather than what you've had a few times in the dead of night, whether it's been government entities or university entities just tearing them down, or then vigilantes in places like Durham, North Carolina, or one vigilante in Houston wanting to blow one up. That's not a good way to go about this, is it?
Yeah, I think the ultimate first issue in all of this is the rule of law. I think what some people are doing, these paid protesters and all these people, is they're being paid to try to create protests and violence and which is, again, it's all anybody who knows anything about socialism and communism and how it's the revolution has to start. And so, number one, we want to keep the rule of law, and however we do any of this, and but then. One of the things that strikes me about this is I think we're in a battle, and this goes beyond monuments. I think we're in a little battle now about whether we're going to believe in free speech. There are people who think that if you watch the language, hate speech, well, that's just nonsense. You don't have a right to hate speech. Well, that's the very kind of speech that's protected by the First Amendment. The speech that angers other people and all this. The people trying to speak at the college universities is, well, it's too dangerous. We're not going to let them come and speak. There's this whole push now that if I think your ideas are disgusting or to me they're just not worthy, then I can shut you down. I mean, with violence and all kinds of things. I think there's a real battle right now over, and I think the statues is a little bit of that. I'm offended, tear it down. And what interests me about this is, I run a group that all we do is religious freedom, and it's amazing how this ties in. Almost all of our cases involve free speech. I mean, are they religious freedoms cases? Yeah. But they're expressing religious speech, and people don't want them to say that, and they try to shut it down. We've got a lot of monument cases where they want to tear down these monuments that have been up for 90 years because they have a cross on them. And I'm just finding a real intersection here, and I think the theme that ties it all together is there are people trying to change the country, and we really need to educate people that, you know what? Even if you disagree with somebody on the other side, free speech is what this country's all about. Even if it's really offensive, you don't answer bad speech with violence and with shutting them down through government power, because then that government power will be used against you next. You answer bad speech with true speech, and the truth will set you free. And that's the better approach. But I think the statues is part of something much bigger, and we've got to be careful in the way we do things, keeping the rule of law, keeping freedom, and going about it the right way.
Yesterday we talked about a story. Mark Zuckerberg, head of Facebook, says that he's going to remove any post that promotes or celebrates hate crimes from Facebook. And so this is just another part of that, I think, because who is the arbiter of what statue is acceptable, what speech is acceptable, what is a hate crime? A lot of the things that Christians believe are, in the minds of the left, a hate crime. So Mark Zuckerberg will now place himself, and really one of the advisors that they use is the Southern Poverty Law Center. Mm-hmm. So, that's dangerous too. And I think we are in a pivotal moment in our country. And, it's really, I think it's up to the Christians. I mean, God's put us here for a reason. We have the Holy Spirit. We have the Word of God. We have groups like First Liberty Institute to actually use the Constitution. We have that. So we have a lot of tools, and it's just a moment where we can use them, and we can get a lot of publicity. I'm so glad for the Coach Kennedy case because it's something that people can sink their teeth into and understand the threat, and that's what we need to discuss in the public square. We don't need Mark Zuckerberg of Facebook, which has become, he's become a billionaire, and his platform has become ubiquitous. It's everywhere. People use it. But now he gets to say what is allowed to be up there, what's good and what's bad, and the bad is going to go in his mind. So we have to protect our pluralism and our freedoms. And so, I mean, it really is, I think point of view becomes more important than ever, perhaps ever in our 40-something year history, because of the threats to our freedom of speech.
And I think it's not only like Facebook. I think Google. I mean, I think this stuff is very scary. The control. I mean, I really think that a lot of what we're seeing is these are monopolies, and which our country is against. Because when Google and Facebook can literally shut down the marketplace because they don't like somebody's opinion, and it's happening. We're seeing numbers of examples. There was a professor just the other day, I know that I saw that they took his YouTube. He's very popular. They took his YouTube down. It's happening. It happened to pro-life groups. This is really dangerous because, it used to be that the marketplace of ideas was, your public streets and parks. And we have great protections for people to be able to speak and do that. But now it's these other platforms, and they're owned by private companies, and the internet really isn't. I mean, and really we shouldn't allow that, because that really is a restriction of free speech, and it's not the government, so they could get away with it. I think it's because they're a monopoly. But that, I think, is one of the greatest dangers we have, is that we can't go into court and win those cases under the Constitution, and places like Google and other places can totally control it.
Yeah. And one of the articles we posted today is by Victor Davis Hanson. He wrote one just the other day in which he said that these are really the 21st century robber barons, and I've got a commentary coming out next week, because if you think about that, Facebook has 2 billion users. They have cornered the social media marketplace.
Yes.
And so in some respects, he's asking, where are the Upton Sinclairs of the 21st century to go against these individuals? Because the robber barons in the 19th century were millionaires. These are multi-billionaires who control the access to information in ways that the Rockefellers and the Vanderbilts never did. And so this is another issue to really begin to think about. We've talked about this before with Craig Parshall when he was with the National Religious Broadcasters, and I think this is a big issue to address. My commentary on that's coming out next week, and I guess we'll also post Victor Davis Hanson's piece on the 21st century robber barons. But we need to take a break. We'll take some more phone calls right after this.
There are those who listen to Point of View while they're driving, and some can listen at home or at work. But here's the question: where do you go where you cannot listen to Point of View? Well, if you have the app, the free Point of View radio app, the answer is just about nowhere. This is an on-the-go world, and now wherever you go, Point of View goes with you. Visit the Apple or Google Play Store and download the free Point of View app. You can listen and watch the program live or play it again later. Get Kerby's Viewpoints commentary. Click the Take Action link, learn about important issues, and make a difference in this world. You can also read articles, find a local radio station, easily contact us with your comments or questions. Don't leave home or the office or anywhere else without Point of View. Again, visit the Apple or Google Play Store today and get the app, the free Point of View radio app. Oh, and one more thing, if you like it, click that little button that says Donate Now and join the team. Point of View and the Point of View app, with you on the go. Point of View will continue after this.
You are listening to Point of View. The opinions expressed on Point of View do not necessarily reflect the views of the management or staff of this station. And now, here again is Kerby Anderson.
If you'd like to join our conversation, 1-800-351-1212. All the lines are full, so as a caller drops off, you might be able to join us. Penna Dexter, Kelly Shackelford in studio. Let's head up to Alaska. Jada, you are on the air. Thank you for joining us today here on Point of View.
Hello, how are you doing today?
Very good.
I have a couple of concerns with the way this is being approached. One of the comments that I heard was this issue needs to be studied. which to me is a waste of time and a real way of making it easy to continue to do the same thing. We've studied this race issue in America since we started dragging people here, since the Emancipation Proclamation, since 1865, since 1965. And still, the problem is that white America has a real difficulty moving out of their comfort zone. And if we're talking about organization and not allowing the rule of violence to be the law, the statues that we're talking about, these people that were Confederates, that were traitors to the United States of America, why would we build statues to criminals? Those people should be treated as such, exactly like Benedict Arnold. That was treason. The other question that I had was, how many studies need to be done before the Caucasian community can really get up and do something? One of the other issues that I have is that this is being approached like it's all of a sudden all of the Negroes are upset and they want us to do something. Negroes have been upset. Black people, colored folks, African Americans have been upset since we were drugged here. And we haven't appreciated the way that we were treated since we got here. What has not happened is white America has not had a conversation and dealt with its bad history. The other point that I wanted to make is it's amazing how people who claim to be men of God don't follow the example of Jesus and turn the table when they know something is absolutely wrong. Taking forever to do the right thing is not acceptable. And those are my comments.
Okay. I think when you're talking about study, we're talking about, individual statues, but I'd love to get your comments.
Yeah, well, there's a lot. I mean, we didn't talk about any specific person. I mean, for instance, one of the things that you just showed was Abraham Lincoln being defaced. I mean, surely, we would rather not have mobs, deface Abraham Lincoln. I think any, study of that would say, no, we're not removing Abraham Lincoln. So you've got to look at the history. Like I know Jada just mentioned Benedict Arnold. I would bet there's a Benedict Arnold statue or a number of them in the United States. I doubt he's being celebrated, but I think it's part of the history, and there's probably some sort of explanation. And so, what we find in the lawsuits a lot of times against the veterans memorials, or for instance, the lawsuits they've brought to take down the 10 Commandments, is you have to look at, what is this statue? What are the statues around it? What is being communicated here by this? And so that's, when you say study, that's what you're talking about, is looking, because if you have to look at each of these situations, because we don't know who we're talking about and which person and why that image is there, because again, I don't know. I hope the one we discussed earlier in Seattle with Lenin, I sure hope it isn't there in a positive way. If so, when I was in Seattle, I'd be voting to take that one down. Because that's surely it's there to show that that's something very different from what we believe. But I mean, it could be there's a bunch of people that want to bring in socialism out there. I don't know, but I think you have to deal with these based upon who the statue is and what it is. And the whole point is we operate by the rule of law and not by mobs. And whatever, even if it's a good intention. Mobs is not the way. We destroy the rule of law. We destroy everything here, and we're not a civilized society anymore, and we can't operate.
That's one of the things I'm wondering as we face this as a country right now is, we're seeing a lot of violence on the left and right, but the numbers are on the left. Let's just put it that way. At these places, there's a lot of people, so there's destruction, and what is the purpose of that? And is it doing what it's supposed to do? I know that there are monuments being taken down because of it, because people are afraid that public officials don't want all that violence going on in their city. So they either pull back or or they change and they capitulate and they tear down the statue. And so is that good? I mean, is the violence actually, is it accomplishing what they want to accomplish? Or, is this just out there making some kind of a statement that I'm a victim?
We had 8 years of a black president, and we did have some of these debates. Not far from where we are, there is what is called Lee Park, and they had been talking for a number of years about renaming it. Now they're very serious about it in more ways. So there's a sense in which the tipping point has come, maybe created because of President Donald Trump is in office. I don't know what the reasons are, but there seems to be a tipping point, and those are times when sometimes that becomes an opportunity that didn't exist before. I mean, I've heard some African-American individuals say, I wanted to take these statues down a long time ago, but I didn't feel like there was enough momentum to actually even raise the issue. Now there seems like there's a possibility of raising that issue and maybe changing the direction of some of the ways in which statues are put up and parks are named and those kinds of things. Because you have a fair number, Kelly, I've lived in the South, we have a fair number of places where you have Robert E. Lee School, Robert E. Lee Park. If indeed we're going to rename all those and tear down those statues, I'd like to at least have it in an orderly fashion and have some honest conversation, which might be part of the opportunity for the white community, as Jada said just a minute ago, to begin to address some of those issues.
Yeah, that's exactly right. I mean, if there's we're talking about a specific one now, but I'm saying there's probably a lot of people that it's a little mixed. I mean, for instance, there's people saying that Thomas Jefferson, the Jefferson Memorial, should be torn down because he owned slaves. George Washington, owned slaves. I mean, so now Robert E. Lee's a little easier figure to talk about, but I do think in the discussion, Jay was talking about having discussion, people learning. I think a lot of people would learn. I don't know how well our schools do at teaching this. I don't think they did that well, as I remember. And of course, the people that are alive now weren't exactly a part of all this. So if they're not taught, if there's not a discussion, if somebody doesn't teach them, there's not going to be this communication. The problem is the communication doesn't occur when there's violence and things are torn down and there's no discussion as to what we're doing and why we're doing it. And you hear, both sides. That's what America's about, not this sort of, I don't like your opinion, so we're going to shut down your free speech. We're going to, engage in violence. We're going to do all that. That's where we lose our country. And so I think this is an opportunity to deal with things in the right way and to move things in a way that's redeeming versus the opposite.
Let's go to South Carolina on the Good News Network. Jim, thank you for joining us today. I think you want to talk about the ACLU.
Yeah, how y'all doing?
Very good.
I was catching the last part of it. I think it was like around 7 p.m. in the afternoon, and it had a little segment on the ACLU, and they was talking about both sides having slaves and stuff, and now they want to tear down the U.S. monuments. And then they had a little picture of a little 3-year-old kid that's saying this person was born a racist. And then after that, they had to come on and says the ACLU and its members that around 2020 there won't be a U.S. Constitution. And, this here is getting dangerous for this country.
Talk about that, Kelly, because that picture of that 2-year-old really caused a lot of stir yesterday, didn't it?
Yeah, I don't know about the rest of the things Jim mentioned, but I think the picture, I think it was whether it was a tweet or an Instagram or something, but it's a picture of just a precious little girl, I don't know, maybe 2 years old with curly hair, I think wearing a shirt that either said freedom or ACLU or something, and she was holding an American flag.
Yes.
And it just said the future of our country. And
the firestorm that blew up after that.
Yeah, and which I think most Americans will look at and say, great, pretty, nice image or whatever. That was not the response to the ACLU. It was, you're white supremacist because this little girl is white. How dare you and all this. And within, I don't know, an hour or so, they apologized. They said, thanks for keeping us accountable. Now, that's racism. I'm sorry, that's racism. And that should never happen. But that shows how we're really in trouble as a country when people start separating people by their race in that kind of a way, a little child.
You'll hear Penna Dexter's commentary on white supremacism right now. We'll be back right after this.
When protests turn violent, as in Charlottesville, Virginia, we need thoughtful answers. Radio host Eric Erickson operates the conservative website Resurgent. There, in a post entitled, "What the Heck is Happening in America?" he writes that both the left and right are trying to build moral responses to the vacuum that is left as the West leaves God behind. They are competing to place their ideologies in charge. Mr. Erickson explains that with the collapse of shared Christian values in the West, the world is descending into natural law, where survival of the fittest reigns supreme. We should acknowledge that most of the violence at protests on campuses and elsewhere has been perpetrated by the left. But in Charlottesville, James Field's white supremacist ideas motivated him to speed his car into a crowd, causing a death and many injuries. Jeffrey Tucker at the Foundation for Economic Education says of the white supremacists, many of the young men and women involved in this movement were raised in good homes and under normal conditions would never hurt anyone. What this is about, he writes, is bad ideas. They crawl into the brain and cause people to imagine things that do not exist. It causes people to seethe with hatred for no apparent reason, to long for the extermination of people who have never done anything wrong. He says we must fight bad ideas with good ideas, clearly and lovingly communicated. Lutheran pastor Hans Fine suggested at the Federalist that President Trump could have clarified the situation by saying something like, just like violence in the name of leftism, white supremacy is nothing other than hatred and idiocy masquerading as ideology and conviction. Those who espouse these views have not taken the principles of one political party and corrupted them. They have simply embraced the doctrine of demons, the belief that man can build utopia by aiming violence and hatred at his neighbor. Every believer who has a platform must clearly and lovingly speak the truth before it's too late. For Point of View, I'm Penna Dexter.
Now, back to Point of View, your listener-supported source for truth.
Back for a few more minutes, and we always say during this time period, for those of you listening online, you can actually hear Penna Dexter's commentary, this one today on white supremacism. If you haven't signed up to receive it in your inbox, you get mine Monday through Friday, you get hers on Saturday. This one, you quote from people like Eric Erickson and Jeffrey Tucker, some others, and Penna, talk about that because it's a resource that I think people might want to download and also think about posting on their Facebook page and starting a conversation.
Yeah, I mean, there are a lot of people talking about white supremacism and these alt-right groups, and that's all very interesting, and you can study that. But I have, 2 minutes to talk about white supremacism. And so what I really say is, first of all, and Eric Erickson made this point, this is kind of where I got it, but we've got God leaving the conversation in the West. He's being left out. And so there's different groups, different ideologies trying to compete for supremacy and for the ability to define what goes on. So that's part of the reason we have these groups knocking heads at certain places. So it's about bad ideas, and a lot of the young people that are out there, these bad ideas are taking hold in their minds, and they're learning them in the colleges and universities and other places. And so that's what it is. And so we need to take the good ideas, as you and Kelly were discussing, and we need to have our arguments so that we can overcome the bad ideas with good ideas, and we can sit down and talk about it instead of fighting each other. And I also included something that a Lutheran pastor said that the president could have said, because he definitely could have been more articulate in talking about this.
Yes.
He would have saved himself a lot of trouble if he would sort of disassociated the right and the Republicans from white supremacists in a good way. And so I have a paragraph that sort of does that in my commentary. It came from this Lutheran pastor. And that's what we have to do. I think we have to have our talking points right. We have to be able to clearly communicate what we believe when we're confronted with these things. And so, and I think we're all responsible to do that. And that's what I encourage believers especially to do. Because as we talked about earlier in the program, God put us here for a reason. So let's figure out how to do good with our rhetoric and what we talk about, and try to calm things down a little bit, because we don't want to be part of the shouting match that inflames passions. We want to be part of the reasonable people that have good arguments.
Foster Fries was on last night, and he's been encouraging people to have coffee with somebody with whom you have a very significant disagreement, and then he offered to pay for that up to 1,000 people at $25 a pop, and so there's just another...
Well, that's expensive coffee.
Yeah, well, he's going to spend $25,000 of his money so that people can buy coffee for both sides and maybe get some donuts and other things, but just really... And it's interesting because you have... some individuals saying, well, I'm going to go and meet with Rachel Maddow, and I'm going to go meet with somebody who is a lesbian activist and whatever. So we'll see how that plays itself out. But it's just one more example of that. But I did want to get to this one caller, because I understand, Carol, that your husband is a veteran and a sculptor. So I'd love to hear, when we're talking about monuments here, Carol in Texas, KSWP. Thank you for joining us today.
Thank you, Kirby. Thank you for taking my call. I appreciate you guys so much. My husband was a veteran. He was a highly decorated Vietnam veteran, but he passed away about 2 years ago, so I hope I'm speaking words that would have come from his heart. Mike was blessed. He loved American history, and he loved art, and he was blessed for 35 or 40 years to provide for our family through a medium of an artistic career doing sculpture in pewter and bronze. Literally thousands of his sculptures were purchased across the United States. All of his sculptures had to do with the unique heritage of our country. He had American, Native American, Civil War, military, wildlife, even Christian sculptures that reflect the history of the United States. And when I hear about these monuments coming down, I think about what Mike would have said, and he said many times, was that he hoped that his sculptures were a three-dimensional portrait of American history. He hoped that they reflected the unique characteristics of our country. You hear a picture's worth 1,000 words. Well, he liked to show that through sculpture. They were never to be worshipped or idolized, or even the people that were representative, but the character of the people and the story that they told. So I really hope that all of this will, people come to their senses, on this, and really reflect the importance of especially these historic sculptures.
Very good. Well, thank you for sharing that. I haven't had a chance to talk to too many people making statues, and it sounds like all sorts of ones. And again, you don't want to always just pull down the ones you disagree with, because some of that's part of our history and heritage. And we've had some people suggest, well, if we keep a sculpture up or a statue up, we can put a plaque and describe what is taking place. And in some cases, maybe we can move them into museums, but just ripping them down in the dead of night, defacing them, that's not the way to go if we want to have a rule of law.
Well, where do you see that? I mean, literally, where do you see statues being torn down in the middle of the night? You see it in places where, there's a revolution, where, communism has taken over the country, where, some other government through violence has taken over the country. So, I mean, that's not,
that's not us.
Yeah, that's not the way this country, one of the beautiful things about this country is we pass the presidency, the control, through peaceful means, and the losing side does that willingly instead of taking up arms. And so that's, the rule of law and the way we do things, a lot of people don't understand this, I don't think, but is more important than even the decisions that you make, because it decides whether you live in a free society or not. And so the way we handle things is very important. And that's one of the reasons why people are very concerned about the police sort of stepping back in a lot of these situations, because you're moving from a rule of law to power and violence,
street violence,
and really the very base level of humanity at that point.
Kelly, we only have about a minute or two left, and I thought we would first of all mention that we have the 2 articles that we talked about earlier about Coach Kennedy. We have a link to First Liberty, and there is a way in which if you just go to First Liberty right away and go firstliberty.org, the pop-up goes to, of course, Coach Kennedy, and it says support Team Kennedy, and you can learn about the case and discover a lot more. And so talk about the way in which people might be able to use this, because this case that's come down from the Ninth Circuit Court, from what I hear, it's not over. And if nothing else, we need to be praying about that. We need to support your ministry, and we certainly need to figure out a way to support Coach Kennedy.
Yeah, I just encourage everybody. This is a case that most people know a little bit about, and this is, one of those times where you can use your email, your social media, whether your Facebook, where you can just hit share, where you can let a lot of people know about this, because I think most people get this. Most people know of coaches, and the idea that a coach can't go by himself after a football game to the center of the field, go to a knee, and for 15 to 20 seconds, thank God for the privilege of coaching these young men. If that's now illegal, we're in trouble as a country, and people need to be in prayer. They need to be writing notes to support Coach Kennedy. They need to be spreading this around, because I think people need to know about this, because I think with unity around the country, maybe even President Trump, who tweeted on this, will rise up again. And I think if the Justice Department enters this and says we're not going to have this, I think that could make a huge difference. So, I think the whole country needs to be in prayer and needs to educate others that this is the battle we're in.
Penna, thank you for hosting the show yesterday, and I know you'll be hosting the show on Monday as well.
I will, and we're going to talk about the problem and growing epidemic of assisted suicide being legalized in various places in the world with Wesley Smith. That'll be one of our topics, and there'll be more.
Well, again, we hope that you have a great weekend. Again, our thoughts go out to those of you in Corpus Christi with Hurricane Harvey. Thank everybody who's been a part of this. We'll see you back here on Monday.
From Affirm Films and Provident Films, who brought you War Room, comes All Saints. New pastor Michael Spurlock, his struggling congregation, and a group of refugees come together, trusting God as they plant seeds for a future that might just save them all.
Start a farm, we work together, we save the church.
All Saints, starring John Corbett. In theaters August 25th. Rated PG. Parental guidance suggested. More information is available at allsaintsmovie.com.
Point of View Radio wants to fuel change in our culture, but we need your help to do it. And I use the word need very intentionally. I worked with a well-known radio ministry for 29 years, a program that helped a lot of people. They got saved, they got elected to Congress. It produced a lot of good. But people started thinking that someone else would give, and that program isn't here anymore. Your gift today can make sure that doesn't happen to Point of View. Visit pointofview.net and click the banner Change Happens With You, or call 1-800-347-5151. Pointofview.net and 800-347-5151. Point of View is produced by Point of View Ministries.